Beneath the dense jungles, buried under shifting sands, and hidden in the shadows of towering mountains lie secrets that have slept for centuries. The lost cities of the Americas aren't just crumbling ruins. They're time capsules, holding stories of empires that rose and fell, of cultures that thrived and vanished, leaving behind whispers of their brilliance. Picture this: vast stone temples swallowed by the rainforest, entire civilizations erased from memory, their names forgotten until explorers stumbled upon their overgrown remains. These places aren't just relics of the past, they're riddles waiting to be solved, and what we've discovered so far will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about history. Think about the last time you stood somewhere ancient, somewhere that hummed with the energy of people long gone. Maybe it was an old building, a battlefield, or even a family heirloom. That feeling like the past is reaching out to you is what drives explorers to uncover the truth about places like El Mirador, the Maya metropolis hidden in Guatemala's jungle, or the mysterious cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde. These aren't just abandoned cities, they're puzzles, and each clue we find changes the story of who lived there, how they built their world, and why they disappeared. And here's the wild part: we've barely scratched the surface. For every answer we uncover, a dozen new questions emerge. That's where this journey begins. Over the next 25 revelations, we're diving deep into the most astonishing secrets of the Americas' lost cities. From underground tunnels lined with gold to encoded messages carved into stone, these aren't just footnotes in history, they're game changers. You'll hear about a city so advanced, its plumbing system put modern engineering to shame. You'll learn why some of these places were abandoned so suddenly that meals were left half-eaten. And you'll meet the archaeologists and adventurers who risked everything to bring these stories back to life. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a detective story, and you're about to become part of it. So let's start where all great mysteries do, with a single, irresistible question: what else is still out there waiting to be found? Deep in the rainforests of Honduras, where the trees grow so thick that sunlight barely touches the ground, there's a legend that's haunted explorers for centuries. They call it La Ciudad Blanca, the White City, a place said to gleam with temples made of pale stone, streets paved with gold, and statues of jaguars and half-human gods. The first whispers came from Spanish conquistadors in the 1500s, who wrote of stumbling upon a city so magnificent its wealth could rival Tenochtitlan. But by the time they returned with reinforcements, it had vanished into the jungle. For 500 years, the White City was dismissed as just another myth, until a team of archaeologists turned myth into reality. In 2012, airborne LiDAR technology peeled back the layers of vegetation like never before, revealing the outlines of plazas, pyramids, and even an intricate network of canals hidden beneath the canopy. But here's the twist: the White City wasn't just one lost metropolis. The scans showed not one but multiple settlements, suggesting an entire civilization thrived in this region, completely unknown to modern history. Expeditions on the ground confirmed it carved monoliths, ceremonial mounds, and artifacts unlike anything found elsewhere in the Americas. Yet despite these breakthroughs, the jungle guards its secrets fiercely. The humidity warps equipment, poisonous snakes lurk underfoot, and local tribes speak of a curse protecting the site. What makes this discovery so extraordinary isn't just the gold or the grandeur, it's the mystery of who built it. Unlike the Maya or the Aztecs, this culture left no written records, no clear ties to known empires. Some researchers believe it could rewrite the story of pre-Columbian trade networks, proving these societies were far more connected than we thought. Others think the city's abrupt abandonment hints at something darker: a catastrophe, a war, or even a disease that wiped out its people overnight. Every artifact raises new questions. A stone vessel depicts a creature that looks eerily like a tapir, but with horns. A ceramic mask shows a face with slanted eyes and elongated features, resembling no known ethnic group in the region. The most tantalizing clue: local legends say the city's true heart lies even deeper in the jungle, guarded by spirits who only reveal it to those deemed worthy. Modern treasure hunters have vanished trying to find it, and scientists admit they've mapped less than 10% of the area. So here's what keeps archaeologists awake at night. If this much was hidden for half a millennium, what else is still out there, waiting in the shadows of those ancient trees? The White City may finally be on the map, but its greatest secrets are still buried. Now picture a city larger than London was in the year 1200, not in Europe, not in Asia, but right in the heart of what's now the United States. This was Cahokia, a sprawling metropolis that rose along the Mississippi River near modern-day St. Louis, where enormous earthen mounds, some over 100 feet tall, still stand like silent giants. At its peak, this was the beating heart of a civilization, home to tens of thousands of people, a hub of trade, ceremony, and engineering so advanced, its city planners aligned streets and plazas with the movements of the sun and stars. But by the mid-1400s, Cahokia was empty, not abandoned gradually, not replaced, just gone. The cooking fires went cold, the games in the Grand Plaza ceased, and the echoes of a culture that once thrived slipped into silence. What could make an entire civilization walk away from their homes, their temples, even their dead? Theories swirl like autumn leaves over those empty mounds. Some point to climate tree rings, tell us of droughts so severe they'd make today's water shortages seem mild. Others argue it was social collapse. Perhaps the ruling class grew too powerful, or the workers who hauled millions of baskets of earth to build those mounds finally rebelled. Then there's the eerie evidence of violence. Archaeologists have found mass graves, bodies stacked without ceremony, some with signs of trauma. Was it war? A failed revolution, or something even darker? But here's where Cahokia's mystery deepens. Unlike the Maya or the Aztecs, Cahokia left no written records, no carvings to tell their side of the story. Even the name Cahokia isn't theirs. It comes from a tribe that arrived centuries later. We're left with fragments, a copper workshop here, a stash of seashells from the Gulf Coast there, hints of a trade network stretching halfway across the continent. And then there's the most haunting clue of all, Woodhenge, a circle of massive red cedar posts used as a solar calendar. It was rebuilt 5 times, each version slightly different, as if the people were desperately trying to recalibrate their connection to the cosmos. What's chilling is how familiar Cahokia's story feels. A society at its peak, mastering its environment, convinced of its permanence only to vanish almost overnight. It's a reminder that even the mightiest civilizations are fragile, and maybe that's why Cahokia's empty mounds still draw us in. They're not just relics, they're a mirror, asking us the same question we're asking about them. How long do any of us really have? For centuries, explorers described the Amazon as a green hell, a vast, impenetrable wilderness where only small tribes eked out a simple existence. The very idea of great cities hidden beneath that emerald canopy seemed laughable, until lasers peeled back the leaves and revealed one of archaeology's most shocking discoveries. Across thousands of square miles in Bolivia and Brazil, LiDAR technology uncovered the bones of an astonishing civilization. Raised highways stretching farther than Roman roads, geometric earthworks precise enough to rival modern surveyors, and pyramid complexes dwarfing those in Egypt. This wasn't just a village or two, it was an urban network supporting millions, thriving in the heart of what we wrongly called untouched jungle, the most jaw-dropping find. The scale of their earth moving. At a site called Kotoka in Bolivia, satellite images show a pyramid with a base covering 30 acres larger than Egypt's Great Pyramid of Giza, yet made entirely of earth. Surrounding it are concentric rings of moats and walls, canals zigzagging like crop circles, and causeways radiating outward like spokes on a wheel. But here's what flips the script: these weren't just ceremonial centers. They were part of a sprawling infrastructure. LiDAR revealed reservoirs lined with waterproof ceramic, suggesting sophisticated water management, and fields where crops grew on artificially raised mounds to survive floods. What makes this rewriting history isn't just the engineering, it's the timeline. Carbon dating shows these cities flourished between the years 500 and 1400, centuries before European contact. Yet Spanish chronicles mention golden cities in the Amazon, tales we dismissed as fantasy. Now we know the truth. Conquistadors likely saw the last remnants of this civilization, its people already decimated by diseases that raced ahead of European boots. Some researchers believe the Amazon's dark earth, patches of unnaturally fertile soil, aren't natural at all, but the layered compost of ancient garbage dumps, proof of dense urban living. The real mystery: why these cities vanished. Unlike Maya collapses tied to drought, the Amazonians thrived in humidity. Some point to traces of extreme soil depletion. Did their genius engineering backfire? Others whisper of a darker parallel. When Europeans brought smallpox to the Andes, it may have ripped through Amazonian trade routes first, leaving empty cities for the jungle to reclaim. Whatever the answer, one thing's certain: we've barely mapped 10% of these networks. Every flight of the LiDAR plane rewrites the map, hinting at lost capitals still waiting beneath those towering trees. High above the Valley of Mexico, where the horizon stretches wide and the air shimmers with heat, lies Teotihuacan, a city so grand, the Aztecs who found its ruins centuries later believed it was built by gods. Even its name isn't from the people who lived there. The Aztecs called it the place where one becomes divine, and it's easy to see why. The Avenue of the Dead runs straight as an arrow for nearly a mile, flanked by towering pyramids. The Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, their stones still humming with the echoes of rituals lost to time. But here's the puzzle that stumps scholars. In a city of 200,000 people, a hub of art, trade, and cosmic wisdom, there's no Rosetta Stone. No books, no deciphered writing system at all. How did an empire this sophisticated rule, trade, and record history without leaving behind words we can read? Walk those silent streets today and the walls whisper in symbols. Murals explode with vivid colors: jaguars, feathered serpents, storm gods with goggle eyes. But these aren't just decorations. They're a language without letters, a code we're only starting to crack. Some researchers think Teotihuacan's writing wasn't scribbled on parchment but painted on skin, woven into textiles, chanted in rituals. Imagine a society where knowledge wasn't locked in books but performed, danced in ceremonies, sung in prayers, carved into the very bones of the city. The pyramids themselves are textbooks. The Pyramid of the Sun aligns with the Pleiades star cluster on key dates, and the Avenue of the Dead points precisely to the setting sun on the summer solstice. This wasn't just urban planning, it was celestial poetry. Then, around the year 550, the poetry stopped. The fires in the temple courtyards burned out. The workshops where artisans crafted obsidian mirrors and jade masks fell silent. Unlike other collapses, there's no evidence of invasion, no piles of weapons or shattered gates. Just emptiness. One theory suggests the rulers grew too proud. Their grip too tight. Clues point to a revolt, with statues of elites deliberately smashed. Others argue the city's thirst outstripped its resources. Traces of ancient canals show frantic repairs, as if the water itself was slipping away. But the most haunting possibility: they saw their own end coming. In the final decades, murals changed. The art grew darker, filled with owls, omens of death, and warriors marching toward some unseen doom. Here's what lingers in the dust of Teotihuacan, a warning. A civilization can master the stars, build monuments to outlast millennia, and still vanish without a single written word to explain why. Maybe that's their real message to us, not in ink but in silence. a reminder that even the mightiest cities are just whispers in the wind, waiting for someone to listen. High in the mist-shrouded peaks of Colombia's Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, where clouds cling to the slopes like ghosts, stone pathways wind through the jungle, paths that lead to nowhere. Or so it seems, these are the threads of a lost world, the last traces of the Tairona, a civilization that carved their cities into mountainsides, then walked away, leaving behind gold-laden tombs and staircases that spiral into the trees. The most haunting of these sites is Pueblito, a labyrinth of terraces and plazas so perfectly fitted together, not even a blade of grass can slip between the stones. But what's chilling isn't just the craftsmanship, it's the silence. No records, no legends, just empty streets where the only footsteps now belong to the Kogi people, who claim descent from the Tairona and warn that these ruins are not abandoned. They're waiting. The Tairona's genius reveals itself in the details. Their cities weren't just built on the mountains, they became the mountains. Terraces stabilized the slopes, preventing landslides, while canals channeled rainwater so precisely, modern engineers still study them. Their goldwork, delicate as spider silk, depicted jaguars, bats, and men transforming into beasts, a shimmering language of symbols we've yet to fully decipher. But the real enigma lies in their disappearance. By the time Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 1500s, Pueblito and its sister cities were already empty, their creators vanished into the forests below. Was it climate, war, or something more deliberate? Local Kogi elders tell of a choice, not a catastrophe. They say their ancestors saw the greed of the invaders coming and simply stepped aside. Retreating higher into the mountains, they watched as the Spanish tore apart sacred sites, melting golden figurines into ingots. Yet the Tairona left clues behind: golden pendants hidden in caves, stone markers aligned with solstices, even a network of trails that connect sacred sites like a celestial map. Modern archaeologists have found some of these treasures, but the Kogi insist the most important ones remain hidden, guarded by spirits who test those who seek them. Here's what sends shivers down historians' spines. Satellite imagery shows over 200 potential Tairona sites still unexcavated beneath the jungle canopy. And the gold, what's been found is just a fraction. Legends speak of a temple lined with golden tiles, its location known only to the jaguars. Whether myth or reality, one truth remains: the Tairona didn't just build cities. They built puzzles, and every stone, every gleam of gold, is a piece we're still learning how to read. In the bone-dry expanse of northwestern New Mexico, where the desert stretches endlessly under a blistering sun, lies a canyon that defies logic. Choco Canyon, home to a dozen massive stone structures called Great Houses, was the epicenter of a civilization that thrived 1,000 years ago, yet left behind a mystery so baffling, archaeologists still argue over it today. These aren't just ruins, they're a carefully calibrated machine. The walls of Pueblo Bonito, the largest great house, align with the cardinal directions within a fraction of a degree. Windows and doorways frame the summer solstice sunrise, and petroglyphs mark the 18.6-year cycle of the moon. But here's what makes Choco truly strange. In a settlement that housed thousands, there's almost no garbage. Every ancient city leaves its trash behind shell piles in coastal towns, broken pottery in Mesopotamian tells. But at Choco, just a handful of middens, barely enough for a village, let alone a hub that imported turquoise from 500 miles away and timber from mountains even farther. So where did it all go? Some theories suggest ritual burning, ceremonial fires that consumed waste as offerings. Others point to the canyon's intricate road system, over 200 miles of arrow-straight pathways, as evidence of a distribution network where garbage was hauled away to satellite communities. But the most haunting possibility, the Chacones didn't see it as waste at all. Take a closer look at those empty spaces. Beneath the plaza of Chetro Kettle, archaeologists found a chamber filled with 30,000 broken potsherds, not tossed aside but carefully placed. At Pueblo Alto, layers of colored sand alternate with ash arranged like a cosmic ledger. This wasn't carelessness, it was intentional. Like the way modern graveyards transform bones into sacred ground, the Chacones may have woven their refuse into the fabric of something greater. Even their water management hints at this, cisterns designed not just to store rain, but to guide it through channels that mirrored the Milky Way. Then there's the ultimate riddle: why build here at all? The canyon has no reliable water source, no fertile soil. Yet for 300 years, people poured their lives into this place, hauling sandstone blocks from miles away, carving staircases into cliff faces, all to create a city that gleamed like a beacon under the desert stars. The answer might lie in the sky. Choco's layout mirrors the constellations, and certain walls catch the light in ways that project moving shadows, a stone calendar counting down to celestial events. Was this a pilgrimage site, a holy clock, or something we haven't even imagined? The silence of Choco Canyon is its loudest message. No defensive walls, no evidence of war, just those precise, purposeful stones. And when the people left around the year 1100, they didn't burn or smash. They simply closed the doors. Walk those ruins today, and you'll find something eerie. The lintels above the doorways are worn smooth, as if generations passed through them right up until the very end. Whatever drew them here, whatever made them stay, it wasn't survival. It was something beyond our modern idea of a city, something that turned even their trash into a prayer. At the heart of Mexico's arid highlands, where cacti claw at the sky and dust devils twist across the plains, the ruins of Cholula stand like shattered teeth. This was once the mighty Toltec capital, a city so powerful, its influence stretched from the Gulf Coast to the Yucatan until it wasn't. Walk among its broken columns today, and you'll find towering stone warriors frozen mid-stride, their blank eyes staring past you as if watching their own civilization crumble. These are the Atlantean figures, named not for any connection to Atlantis, but for their sheer scale, each one a 14-foot sentinel carved with terrifying precision. But here's the unsettling truth: no one knows what they truly represent. Priests, gods, or warnings from a society that saw its end coming. The Toltecs weren't just builders, they were myth-makers. Later Aztec rulers claimed descent from them, spinning tales of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god-king who supposedly ruled Cholula before being cast out. But archaeology paints a murkier picture. The city's golden age lasted barely 2 centuries, from around the year 900 to 1100, before its palaces were scorched and its temples defaced. The question isn't just why Cholula fell, but why its collapse was so violent. In one chamber, archaeologists found a jade mask deliberately smashed, its fragments arranged in a spiral, a gesture that reeks of ritual destruction. Nearby, a mass grave held the bodies of children, their bones tangled with the remains of butchered eagles, as if the city's final moments were steeped in desperation. Drought gnawed at Cholula's foundation's tree. Rings from the era show decades of punishing dry spells, but that's only part of the story. Unlike Choco Canyon's orderly departure, Cholula's end was chaos. The city's aqueducts were hacked apart, its carved monuments toppled face down. Some researchers see the hand of invaders, perhaps the nomadic Chichimecs, drawn by Cholula's fading wealth. Others argue it was a revolt from within, the underclass rising against rulers who'd hoarded water and grain. The most chilling clue, those Atlantean statues. Originally, they held spears and atlatls weapons, but their arms were systematically broken off, their tools stripped away. Whoever destroyed Cholula didn't just want to conquer it. They wanted to disarm its very gods. Yet the Toltecs left something behind, a cultural ghost that haunts Mesoamerica. At Chichen Itzá, 1,000 miles away, carvings echo Cholula's art down to the smallest detail. Even the famous serpent columns of the Maya city seem lifted straight from Cholula's playbook. Was this imitation, tribute, or evidence that the Toltecs didn't vanish but scattered, carrying their secrets with them? The answer might lie beneath Cholula's main plaza, where ground-penetrating radar hints at an earlier pyramid buried like a nesting doll, a structure older, stranger, and still waiting to tell its story. What lingers at Chala isn't just the silence of abandonment. It's the sense of a civilization that knew it was living on borrowed time. The Atlantean statues still stand, not as guardians but as witnesses. Their missing weapons aren't just damage, they're a message, a reminder that even the mightiest empires can be reduced to fragments, their truths buried under the weight of their own myths. High in the Andes, where the air thins and the sky presses close, Lake Titicaca stretches like a sheet of hammered silver between Peru and Bolivia. At 12,500 feet above sea level, it's the highest navigable lake on Earth, a place the Inca revered as the birthplace of the sun itself. But beneath its shimmering surface lies a secret far older than the Inca Empire. The ruins of an entire civilization, their stonework swallowed by the lake's rising waters centuries ago. Imagine walking along a submerged road, your fingers brushing against walls that haven't felt sunlight in 1,000 years. This isn't fiction. It's the reality divers uncovered when they found temples, terraces, and even a sprawling ceremonial complex hidden beneath the waves. The discovery began with local legends. Aymara fishermen had long spoken of a city of the gods beneath the lake, a place their ancestors avoided, fearing the spirits that guarded it. Then, in 2012, sonar scans revealed geometric shapes too precise to be natural, a labyrinth of structures stretching over 6 square miles near the lake's northeastern shore. When divers descended, they found stepped platforms like miniature pyramids, stone anchors for reed boats, and a snaking roadway that vanished into the murk. The most startling find, a monolith carved with intricate symbols, resting on the lakebed as if placed there deliberately. Carbon dating pinned these ruins to a time long before the Inca, some as old as 1,500 years. What's baffling is how these structures ended up underwater. Lake Titicaca's water levels have fluctuated wildly over centuries, but to submerge entire cities required a catastrophic shift. Geological studies point to a massive drought around the year 600, followed by rapid flooding, perhaps triggered by glacial melt or seismic activity. But here's the twist: the ruins aren't haphazard. Walls are intact, artifacts neatly arranged. This wasn't a violent deluge, it was a slow, inevitable rise, giving people time to leave. Some researchers believe the lake's inhabitants saw the waters coming and ritually sealed their sacred sites before retreating to higher ground. The real enigma is who built them. Pottery shards pulled from the lakebed bear designs unlike anything from known Andean cultures. One theory links the ruins to the Tiwanaku, a civilization that thrived nearby but mysteriously collapsed around the year 1000. Yet the underwater structures predate even them. The monolith symbols, a mix of spirals, feline shapes, and celestial markers, suggest a cosmology distinct from later empires. Were these the ancestors of the Tiwanaku, a lost branch of Andean culture erased from history? What lingers in these silent ruins is more than stone. Divers report an uncanny feeling down there, a pressure in the water that doesn't come from depth, as if the lake itself remembers. Local shamans still perform offerings on the shore, tossing coca leaves into the waves as their ancestors did, whispering to whatever lies beneath. Maybe that's the true secret of Lake Titicaca, not just who built these sunken cities, but why they chose to let the water take them, and what they hoped the lake would keep safe for eternity. Beneath the scorching sun of southern Peru's desert, where the Nazca lines snake across the earth like messages meant for the gods, lies a different kind of mystery, one buried in the sand. Cahokia, the Nazca's sprawling ceremonial capital, wasn't just a city. It was a stage for rituals so strange they'd make even the most seasoned archaeologist pause. Picture this, a complex of adobe pyramids rising from the dust, their walls painted in vivid colors long since faded by the wind, and beneath them, tombs filled with rows of human skulls, not victims of war but offerings. These weren't enemy trophies, they were revered. Some skulls show signs of careful preservation, their foreheads drilled with holes as if strung and displayed like sacred jewels. What makes Cahokia unnerving isn't just the skulls, it's the abruptness of its end. For 500 years, this was the spiritual heartbeat of the Nazca, a place where thousands gathered for festivals tied to water, fertility, and the stars. Then, around the year 500, the rituals stopped. The temples were sealed, not with violence, but with a quiet finality, as if the people knew they'd never return. Walk those ruins today, and you'll find jars of untouched food still sitting where they were left, sandals stacked neatly in corners, and the remnants of feasts half consumed. It's as if the entire city pressed pause. The answer might lie in the desert itself. Core samples from nearby riverbeds tell a story of relentless drought decades where rain never came. The Nazca had mastered water, carving underground aqueducts called puquios to channel scarce drops, but even their ingenuity had limits. Yet here's the twist: Cahokia's abandonment wasn't chaotic. It was choreographed. Archaeologists found evidence of closure rituals, doorways bricked up with precision, sacred objects buried in geometric patterns, even the intentional collapse of certain walls to shield what lay inside. This wasn't a retreat, it was a farewell. But why the skulls? Recent DNA analysis reveals something startling. Many belong to the Nazca themselves, suggesting these weren't war prizes but kin, transformed into guardians through death. Some researchers believe the heads were part of a desperate bargain with the gods, a last attempt to summon rain by offering the most precious thing imaginable: memory. The Nazca may have believed these preserved faces could carry prayers to the afterlife, a bridge between the living and the forces that controlled the skies. The silence of Cahokia is its loudest lesson. Unlike other collapsed civilizations, there's no evidence of invasion or revolt, just a people who, faced with an unwinnable battle against the desert, chose to walk away with intention. They left behind puzzles in the sand, a mural of a deity with serpentine hair, a cache of unbroken ceramics depicting creatures that blend bird and human features, and those eerie, watchful skulls. The Nazca lines get all the attention, but Cahokia is the real key to understanding this culture, not as artists, but as survivors who staged one final ritual: the careful, deliberate act of vanishing. In the rolling hills of southern Ohio, where the trees give way to open meadows, the earth itself rises in strange, deliberate shapes: circles, squares, and octagons sculpted from soil and stone. These are the works of the Hopewell culture, a people who flourished 2,000 years ago, leaving behind not just mounds but a celestial map written in dirt. The Great Octagon at Newark stretches over 1,800 feet across, its walls perfectly aligned to the points where the moon rises at its most extreme northern and southern positions in an 18.6-year cycle. But here's what stuns astronomers: the Hopewell didn't just track the moon, they encoded its dance into the landscape itself, creating a grid so precise, modern researchers needed satellite imagery to grasp its full scope. Walk the paths between these earthworks today, and you're tracing constellations. The Newark Earthworks octagon connects to a perfect circle via a narrow causeway, mimicking the alignment of Orion's belt with the rising summer solstice sun. 50 miles away, the High Bank Works repeats the pattern, another octagon and circle, but this one rotated exactly 90 degrees, as if marking a different phase of the lunar cycle. Together, these sites form a network spanning hundreds of square miles, each mound and ditch positioned like a star in a sprawling cosmic diagram. How did a culture without written language achieve this? The Hopewell's tools were simple digging sticks, baskets for hauling soil, but their knowledge was anything but. At the Mound City Group, excavators found copper from the Great Lakes, mica from the Appalachians, and obsidian from Wyoming, proof of a trade network stretching thousands of miles. They weren't isolated farmers, they were astronomers with connections across the continent, exchanging ideas as freely as goods. Some researchers believe the earthworks weren't just observatories but pilgrimage sites where people gathered to witness celestial events timed with agricultural cycles or spiritual ceremonies. The most haunting clue lies in the math. The perimeter of the Great Octagon measures exactly 1,054 feet, a number that appears in ancient Mesoamerican calendars tied to Venus's movements. Coincidence or evidence of a shared astronomical language that spanned the Americas? When European settlers first encountered these mounds, they dismissed them as primitive forts or burial sites. Now we know the truth. The Hopewell were sketching the heavens in the soil, leaving behind a message we're only beginning to decipher. Every aligned wall, every carefully placed embankment whispers the same question. If they could map the sky with sticks and dirt, what else did they know that we've yet to uncover? Perched on a flattened mountaintop in southern Mexico, the ruins of Monte Alban loom over the Oaxaca Valley like a stone crown, a city so audacious, its builders reshaped the very peak to their will. For over 1,000 years, this was the beating heart of the Zapotec civilization, its temples and palaces stacked like terraces against the sky. But wander its plazas today, and you'll stumble upon one of archaeology's most chilling galleries, the danzantes, hundreds of stone slabs carved with figures frozen in agony. These aren't dancers, as early scholars assumed. They're prisoners, their contorted bodies displaying sliced ribs, limp limbs, and in some cases genital mutilation, a stark billboard of Zapotec power. Yet the real mystery isn't the violence. It's why, at the height of their dominance, the rulers who commissioned these carvings walked away, leaving their sky-high citadel to the wind. The scale of Monte Alban's engineering still stuns visitors. To create a level foundation, Zapotec laborers moved enough earth to fill 12 Olympic swimming pools, all without beasts of burden or metal tools. Their ball court's acoustics are so precise, a whisper at one end carries clearly to the other. But it's the danzantes that reveal the city's dark heartbeat. Recent translations of Zapotec glyphs confirm these aren't generic enemies. They're named elites from rival city-states, their humiliation etched in stone as both warning and propaganda. One slab shows a captive with two glyphs above his head, flower and mountain, likely the name of his homeland. Another depicts a man with closed eyes and an open mouth, the Zapotec symbol for death. This was psychological warfare carved in rock. Then, around the year 750, the carvings stop. The royal palaces show signs of being meticulously cleaned out. No smashed pottery, no hastily abandoned treasures, just empty rooms swept bare. Unlike the Maya collapses tied to drought, Monte Alban's water system, fed by ingenious underground channels, still functioned. So why leave? Archaeologists point to a single cryptic clue, a hastily built wall erected across the main plaza, cutting the city in half. Was this a last-ditch effort to quell unrest between factions, a barrier against some unseen threat? The answer might lie in the valley below. Around the same time, smaller towns began building fortifications walls with narrow entryways designed to funnel attackers into kill zones. Yet Monte Alban's elites didn't flee to these settlements. Instead, they scattered to new, smaller cities, each claiming descent from the old capital. It's as if they chose to dissolve their empire rather than fight for it. What lingers on this mountaintop isn't just the silence of abandonment, it's the irony. The Zapotec carved their dominance into stone, believing their power would last as long as those slabs. In the end, only the victims' faces endured, their agony outliving the kingdom that created them. The danzantes remain, not as trophies of victory, but as tombstones for an empire that walked away from its own throne. Off the rugged coast of Lake Superior, where waves crash against cliffs of ancient basalt, lies an island hiding one of North America's oldest industrial secrets, Isle Royale. 7,000 years ago, long before the pyramids of Egypt rose from the sands, people here were hauling pure copper from deep pits, their stone tools prying loose chunks so pure they could be worked without smelting. These miners left behind not just tools but trenches, some over 20 feet deep, their walls still scarred by the rhythmic strikes of hammerstones. But the real shock isn't just the scale of their work. It's the reach of their trade. Copper from this very island has been found in burial mounds in Ohio, ceremonial sites in Florida, and even as far as the Hopewell earthworks 1,000 miles away. How did a resource mined in the frigid north become the lifeblood of rituals across a continent? The answer lies in the copper itself. Unlike later European metals alloyed with tin or lead, Isle Royale's copper was nature's perfection, 99.9% pure, gleaming like a sunset when polished. Forging it required no furnaces, just patience and heat. Artisans would cold hammer the metal, folding and pounding it into razor-sharp blades, ornate breastplates, and earspools so thin, light passed through them like stained glass. But here's what baffles researchers. Despite its value, the mining stopped abruptly around 3,000 years ago. The pits were abandoned, tools left in place as if the workers simply walked away mid-shift. No evidence of conflict, no environmental collapse, just silence. One clue might hide in the chemistry. Recent isotope testing reveals something startling. While early Native American societies treasured this copper, later cultures like the Mississippians ignored it entirely. Some scholars argue the metal became taboo, perhaps linked to a forgotten spiritual shift. Others point to climate. As the glaciers retreated, lake levels rose, flooding shallow mines and forcing tribes to adapt. But the most haunting theory comes from Ojibwe oral tradition. Elders speak of the Old Ones who dug the copper, warning that disturbing it would awaken Miss Hypeshoe, the underwater lynx, a spirit who guards the metal with storms and misfortune. What lingers on Isle Royale isn't just physical. Dive its surrounding waters and you'll find copper nuggets still wedged in crevices, untouched for millennia. The miners didn't strip the land bare. They took only what they needed, leaving offerings of tobacco and red ochre in the pits. In their abrupt departure, they left behind a puzzle more valuable than the metal itself, a reminder that some resources aren't just commodities, but threads in a cultural tapestry we're still learning to read. Cut into the sheer sandstone cliffs of Colorado's Mesa Verde, the Cliff Palace isn't just a marvel of ancient engineering, it's a labyrinth of unanswered questions. From a distance, this 600-room ancestral Puebloan complex looks like a honeycomb of doorways and windows, but peer closer, and you'll notice something unsettling: sealed passages. These aren't collapsed tunnels or eroded doorways. They're deliberate closures, their edges too precise, their plaster too smooth, as if whatever lay beyond was meant to stay hidden forever. The most infamous of these is a low, narrow corridor near the site's ceremonial kiva, walled up with stones that match the surrounding masonry so perfectly, you'd miss it if not for the slight unevenness in the mortar. Early archaeologists assumed it was a sealed storage room, but thermal imaging tells a different story, a void stretching at least 30 feet into the cliffside, with temperature fluctuations suggesting chambers beyond. What makes these tunnels so unnerving isn't just their secrecy, it's their context. The ancestral Puebloans were meticulous architects, aligning entire villages to solstice sunrises and designing ventilation systems to regulate kiva temperatures. Yet these passages defy logic. Some are too narrow for any practical use, their ceilings barely 3 feet high. Others twist at odd angles before terminating abruptly, as if redirecting away from something. Local Hopi oral traditions hint at their purpose, speaking of sipapu, sacred portals to the underworld guarded by clans who sealed them when the people migrated south. But modern researchers have uncovered even stranger clues. In 2019, ground-penetrating radar detected an anomaly beneath one sealed tunnel, a circular depression lined with traces of turquoise dust, a mineral associated with ritual offerings across the southwest. Then there's the timing. Cliff Palace was abandoned around the year 1300, part of a mass exodus from the Mesa Verde region. Unlike other sites left in disarray, this one was meticulously closed. Food stores were emptied, tools removed, and yes, those tunnels sealed. Not in haste, but with care, as if the act of closure was itself a ceremony. Some archaeologists argue the tunnels were ritual pathways, used for initiations or communicating with ancestors before being retired. Others point to darker possibilities. Excavations in similar sites revealed caches of ceremonial objects, feathered staves, prayer sticks, buried near sealed passages, suggesting a last attempt to feed whatever spiritual presence dwelled within. The most tantalizing theory: these tunnels aren't dead ends at all. In 2021, a team using LiDAR discovered that several sealed passages align with geological faults, natural conduits where groundwater seeps through the sandstone. To a culture that revered springs as sacred, these veins of water might have been literal portals to the spirit world. Today, park rangers warn visitors not to linger near the closures. Not for safety reasons, but because some still report whispers in the wind, faint echoes of flute music or chanting, drifting from behind walls that haven't been opened in 700 years. Whether memory or myth, one thing's certain: the Cliff Palace's greatest secrets aren't in its towering cliffs or sunlit plazas. They're in the dark, waiting. Percy Fawcett's final letter in 1925 crackled with certainty. "We go confident that Z is there." Then the famed explorer vanished into the Amazon, leaving behind only cryptic notes about a city of gold hidden in the green hell. For decades, his obsession was dismissed as fantasy until anthropologists stumbled upon the Guaycurú people, a tribe whose arrows tipped with deadly poison matched Fawcett's descriptions precisely. These weren't just weapons, they were clues. The Guaycurú's ancestors had built vast earthworks and roads, remnants of a civilization Fawcett might have glimpsed before the jungle swallowed him whole. The poison told its own story. Made from the venom of Amazonian frogs and fortified with crushed ants, the Guaycurú's arrow toxin could drop a tapir in seconds, exactly the kind of lethal defense Fawcett warned about in his journals. But here's what he couldn't have known: the poison's recipe was a living relic passed down from a culture that once thrived where the explorer searched. Satellite imagery later revealed geometric earthworks near Guaycurú lands, hidden under centuries of growth, proof of settlements far grander than Fawcett imagined. The tribe's oral history even spoke of white men who came long before, only to be driven off by arrows. Fawcett's last campfire might have flickered just miles from the truth. Modern archaeologists found pottery shards and charcoal near a Guaycurú village, carbon dated to the early 20th century. Could these be traces of his final camp? The Guaycurú themselves tell of strangers who asked too many questions about the old stones before disappearing into the forest. What's chilling isn't just the parallel, it's the realization that Fawcett's Z wasn't a single golden metropolis, but a network of interconnected communities, their knowledge preserved in the very toxins that likely ended his search. The real secret of the poison arrows isn't their deadly efficiency, it's what they guarded. The Guaycurú's ancestors didn't just defend their homes, they protected a way of life intricately tied to the land. Their earthworks weren't just foundations, they were celestial calendars, their ditches aligning with solstice sunrises. Fawcett sought treasure, but the gold was never the point. The true riches were the stories, the science, the survival of a people who outlasted empires. Every dipped arrow was a warning: some secrets aren't meant to be taken. They're meant to endure. Beneath the dense jungle canopy of the Yucatan Peninsula, where tree roots twist like serpents through limestone, the ancient Maya built roads that defy logic, not to connect the living but to guide the dead. These sakbiab, or white roads, weren't paved with ordinary stone. They were coated in gleaming plaster, polished to reflect moonlight, stretching arrows straight for miles between cities. But some don't lead to grand plazas or temples. They vanish into gaping cenotes, flooded sinkholes where the water's surface hides layers of jade beads, shattered pottery, and bones arranged with eerie precision. These weren't trade routes, they were highways for the afterlife. Take Sakbi 1 at Kabar, for example, a 100-foot-wide avenue running 60 miles toward the distant city of Yaxuna. Walk its length today and you'll find it doesn't terminate at a marketplace or palace. It dead ends at a cenote brimming with skeletal remains, many showing signs of ritual defleshing. Divers probing these watery chambers have surfaced with artifacts that rewrite Maya spirituality. Obsidian blades still stained with ceremonial blue pigment, conch shells carved with the faces of rain gods, even infant bones wrapped in textiles dyed with rare marine purple. The deeper you go, the clearer the pattern becomes. These roads weren't just paths. They were invitations luring spirits downward to Xibalba, the underworld. Why invest such labor in roads to nowhere? The answer lies in the cenotes themselves. To the Maya, these weren't just water sources, they were portals. Sacred texts like the Popol Vuh describe caves and sinkholes as mouths of the earth, places where deities like Chok, the storm god, could be petitioned for rain. But recent sonar scans reveal something spine-tingling. Several Sakbiob align perfectly with the movement of Venus, the planet tied to the hero twins' descent into the underworld in Maya mythology. At certain times of year, moonlight would slither down these plastered causeways like a silver serpent, illuminating the cenotes at just the moment Venus dipped below the horizon. This wasn't engineering, it was celestial theater. The most unsettling discoveries come from Chichen Itza's sacred cenote. When dredged in the early 20th century, it yielded not just gold and jade, but over 200 human skeletons, nearly half of them children under 12. Forensics tell a grim story. Many bones show pre-mortem fractures, suggesting victims were alive when cast into the water. Yet there's a paradox here. Chemical analysis of teeth reveals these weren't local children. They came from as far away as Guatemala and Honduras, their bodies transported along Sakbiob like sacred cargo. Some researchers believe these were divine currency, offerings to secure trade alliances or appease drought-bringing spirits. Now here's what chills archaeologists to the bone. Not all sacrificial cenotes are marked by roads. Some Sakbiob simply stop in the jungle, their ends obscured by vegetation. Ground-penetrating radar has detected hidden sinkholes beneath these terminations, collapsed chambers yet to be explored. What's down there? More bones, lost manuscripts, or something the Maya sealed away on purpose? The Sakbiob's true function may be written in their very material. That gleaming white plaster wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. In Maya cosmology, white represented the purity of souls in transit. When a road ends abruptly at a cenote's edge, it's not an unfinished project. It's a completed thought, a bridge between realms, whispering that for the Maya, death wasn't an end, but a journey along a luminous path we're only beginning to trace. Along the parched northern coast of Peru, where the desert meets the Pacific in a relentless dance of wind and waves, the ruins of Chan Chan rise like a mirage, an adobe metropolis so vast, its 10 square miles once housed 60,000 people. This was the capital of the Chimu Empire, a civilization that thrived on brutal efficiency, conquering neighbors with armies clad in shimmering silver armor and controlling water through a network of canals so precise they turned sand into farmland. But Chan Chan's greatest engineering triumph became its downfall. Walk its crumbling walls today, and you'll find corridors lined with murals of ocean creatures. Not just fish, but whales breaching, their massive bodies frozen in time on sun-baked clay. These aren't decorations, they're omens. Around the year 1400, an El Niño event of biblical proportions slammed into the coast. Rain fell in sheets where none had fallen for generations. The canals overflowed, the adobe bricks dissolved like sugar, and the streets became rivers. The murals tell the story, waves swallowing buildings, sea monsters winding through what were once royal courtyards. But here's the chilling detail: the Chimu didn't just paint these scenes after the fact. Archaeologists found identical motifs in layers buried beneath the flood debris, meaning they'd been warning of this catastrophe for decades, perhaps centuries. Were they recording ancestral memories of past floods, or had their priests foreseen the coming deluge in the patterns of the sea? The flood's aftermath reveals a society in freefall. In the Teotihuacan palace, excavators uncovered a row of skeletons, women and children huddled in a corner, their bones tangled with the remnants of a final, desperate meal of shellfish. Unlike other mass graves signaling invasion, these bodies show no trauma. They simply drowned, waiting for waters that never receded, the real tragedy. The Chimu had the technology to survive. Their reservoirs could hold a year's worth of water, and their engineers had built baffle systems to slow flood surges. But this was no ordinary storm. Sediment cores show the 1400 event was a once-in-a-millennium disaster, with ocean temperatures spiking 9 degrees above normal. Even the whales' new bone fragments in middens prove they'd fled the coast months before, their absence likely another omen ignored. What's haunting about Chan Chan isn't just its collapse but its foresight. Those murals weren't passive art, they were a language. One panel shows a whale wrapped around a sinking temple, its eye eerily human. Another depicts a priest holding a conch to his ear as if listening for the next wave. The Chimu didn't just record history, they anticipated it. Yet when the water came, even their gods couldn't save them. Today, their ruins stand as a paradox, a city drowned by the very element they worshipped, its walls whispering a warning we're only now learning to hear. High above Peru's arid coastal plain, where the wind whips sand against ancient adobe walls, the Pyramid of Huaca de la Luna stands as a monument to both devotion and brutality. This wasn't just a temple, it was a stage for some of the most elaborate ritual sacrifices in the Americas. Step inside, and the walls tell a story in vivid color. A deity known as the Decapitator, his clawed hands clutching a crescent blade, his victim's blood streaming down the steps like rivulets of rain. But these aren't just symbols. Beneath the plaza, archaeologists uncovered the bones of at least 70 men, their skulls separated from their spines with surgical precision, their ribs marked by cuts that suggest their hearts were torn out while they still drew breath. What makes these sacrifices so chilling isn't just the violence, it's the method behind it. Forensic analysis reveals the victims weren't random captives. Their bones show healed fractures and signs of prolonged malnutrition, suggesting they were kept alive for years as fodder for ceremonies. Isotope testing adds another layer. These men came from distant regions, likely seized in raids as tribute to the March Lords. Yet here's the twist. Some skulls bear evidence of ritual healing, small holes drilled to relieve pressure, as if the priests tried to keep them alive just long enough for the right celestial alignment. The murals hold even darker clues. One panel shows a procession of prisoners forced to drink from goblets, their bodies limp as they're led to the killing floor. Chemical residue on excavated cups confirms this wasn't artistic license. The vessels once held a potent cocktail of fermented corn and hallucinogens, perhaps to numb the victims or send them into visions before their deaths. Another fresco depicts a priest clad in gold, holding a severed head aloft as rivers of blood curl into stylized waves at his feet. The symbolism is deliberate. The Moch believed these offerings nourished the land, turning sacrifice into a covenant with the gods of sun and sea. But why such extremes? The answer might lie in the dirt itself. Sediment cores from nearby valleys show catastrophic El Niño events coincided with the pyramid's bloodiest phases. When crops failed and floods ravaged their canals, the Moch didn't just pray, they doubled down on their bargain with the divine. The more the skies withheld rain, the more lives they offered. In one burial shaft, excavators found a boy no older than 10, his tiny skeleton surrounded by the shells of spiny oysters, creatures that thrive in turbulent, nutrient-rich waters. His death, it seems, was meant to summon the very storms that were destroying them. Yet Huaca de la Luna's greatest secret isn't in its graves or murals. It's in the shadows between them. Infrared scans reveal hidden chambers beneath the main plaza, their walls lined with thin sheets of copper, a metal sacred to the March storm god. No human remains were found inside, only bundles of knotted cords, each tied in complex patterns that mirror the knots used later by the Inca to record information. Were these accounting systems tallying sacrifices, maps of the afterlife, or something more unsettling? The chamber's doors were sealed not with rubble, but with carefully placed boulders, as if whatever they contained wasn't meant to be seen again. Today, the wind still howls through Huaca de la Luna's plazas, carrying whispers of a civilization that gambled everything on the blade's edge between survival and sanctity. The decapitator's gaze still glares from the walls, his lesson written not in ink but in the bones beneath your feet. For the March, cruelty wasn't just ritual, it was arithmetic. The more they bled, the longer the rains might come, and when the calculations failed, they vanished into the desert, leaving behind a pyramid that stands not as a tomb, but as a ledger of desperation. Buried in the swampy lowlands of Mexico's Gulf Coast, the Olmec civilization left behind a mystery carved in stone, colossal heads so heavy, their creators would have needed hundreds of laborers just to move them an inch. These aren't just sculptures, they're portraits, each weighing up to 40 tons, with thick lips, flattened noses, and helmets that hint at a culture obsessed with power and identity. But here's what chills archaeologists: nearly every single one has been decapitated. At San Lorenzo, the oldest Olmec center, 10 of these massive heads were found violently toppled, their faces smashed or defaced, their bodies, if they ever had them, nowhere to be found. The damage wasn't the work of invaders. Tool marks match Olmec implements, suggesting the people who revered these monuments later turned on them with systematic fury. What could drive a civilization to destroy its own legacy? The answer might lie in the heads themselves. Unlike later Mesoamerican cultures that worshipped distant gods, the Olmec seemed to deify their rulers. These colossal visages likely depicted living kings, their stern gazes meant to intimidate and inspire. But power has a way of curdling. Soil samples from San Lorenzo reveal layers of ash and charcoal, evidence of widespread burning that coincides with the head's destruction. Some researchers believe a revolt tore through the city, the oppressed underclass rising up not just against their rulers, but against the very symbols of their authority. Others point to eerier clues. A few heads were carefully buried in pits, arranged in precise lines as if part of a ritual. Were the Olmec trying to appease some unseen force by sacrificing their own history? The most haunting discovery isn't the violence, it's the precision. At La Venta, another Olmec site, a decapitated head was found nestled against a stash of jade axes, their blades unmarked by use. These weren't weapons, they were offerings placed with care beside the shattered face of a king. This wasn't mindless destruction. It was a calculated act, a message carved not in stone but in absence. Now consider the timeline. The decapitations didn't happen at the height of Olmec power, but as their influence waned. Droughts parched the region, trade routes faltered, and the once great city of San Lorenzo was abandoned to the swamps. In their final years, the Olmec didn't just abandon their cities, they erased their own rulers from memory. Those colossal heads, once symbols of unshakable authority, became something else, warnings. Maybe they were meant to scare future tyrants, or maybe, in their silent, headless state, they were the Olmec's last confession, an admission that no empire, no matter how mighty its statues, can outrun its own flaws. Today, the heads still watch from museum halls, their missing bodies a reminder that the past isn't just something we inherit. It's something we choose, piece by piece, to keep or destroy. And sometimes the most powerful legacy isn't what's left standing, it's what's deliberately left broken. High in the arid mesas of the American Southwest, where the sun scorches sandstone into dust, the ancestral Pueblones faced a crisis that would test the limits of human endurance. Between the years 1075 and 1125, the very skies seemed to turn against them. tree rings tell the story, a 50-year mega drought so severe it makes modern dry spells seem like passing showers. At Choco Canyon, the heart of their civilization, the great houses stood silent as crops withered and reservoirs ran dry. Yet here's what baffles archaeologists: while Choco emptied, other Puebloan villages not only survived, they thrived. What made the difference between collapse and resilience wasn't just the drought itself, but how these communities chose to remember the past. Take Mesa Verde, for example. While Choco's population dwindled, cliff dwellings like Cliff Palace saw construction boom. The secret lay in their water systems. Where Choco relied on massive ceremonial reservoirs, Mesa Verde settlers built small, dispersed check dams that captured every precious drop of rainfall. But the real innovation was cultural. Artifacts show Mesa Verde's people were master adapters, blending old knowledge with new solutions. Pottery styles shifted to thinner walls that used less clay, a small change, but one that conserved scarce resources. Their turkey pens expanded too, suggesting they turned to protein sources that required less water than crops. Meanwhile, Choco's leaders doubled down on tradition, funneling labor into maintaining grand plazas and roads long after they'd become impractical. The contrast grows starker when you examine the bones. Skeletal remains from Choco show signs of chronic malnutrition, enameled defects in children's teeth, stunted growth lines in bones. Yet 50 miles north at Aztec ruins, a settlement with ties to Choco, burials reveal healthier populations. Isotope analysis tells why. While Choco's elites clung to maize-based diets even as fields failed, Aztec's people diversified, consuming more wild plants and game. This wasn't just pragmatism, it was a radical shift in values. Where Choco's art glorified maize gods right until the end, Aztec's pottery began depicting prickly pear cactus and drought-resistant amaranth. Now here's the twist: the survivors weren't necessarily the most advanced. Some of the hardiest groups lived in humble pit houses, not towering stone complexes. Their advantage: mobility. When the rains failed, they could relocate entire villages in a season, following ancient migration routes passed down through oral tradition. Choco's grandeur became its trap. You can't move a 5-story great house when the water runs out. What lingers in these ruins isn't just a lesson about climate change. It's about the price of permanence. The ancestral Puebloans who endured weren't those with the grandest monuments, but those who kept their stories flexible. Their descendants, the modern Pueblo people, still carry this wisdom. As one Hopi elder put it, "We don't inherit the land from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children." The drought didn't just starve a civilization. It revealed which roots were deep enough to bend without breaking. While the Aztecs dominated central Mexico with their obsidian blades and jaguar warriors, their greatest rivals to the west guarded a technological secret that could have rewritten history. The Tarascan Empire, known to themselves as the Purepecha, didn't just dabble in metal. They built an entire military and economic empire around it, crafting bronze spearheads and copper axes while their neighbors still relied on stone. But here's the twist: by the time Spanish conquistadors arrived, the Tarascans' metallurgical prowess had vanished from recorded history, leaving behind only cryptic clues buried in the red earth of Michoacán. Walk the ruins of Tizintzatzin, the Tarascan capital perched above Lake Pátzcuaro, and you'll find evidence of their genius in every shovel of dirt. Furnaces lined with refractory clay, able to withstand temperatures hot enough to melt copper, still dot the landscape. Excavations have uncovered not just tools but intricate ornaments, copper bells tuned to specific pitches, bronze tweezers for personal grooming, even metal mirrors polished to a shine that could rival their obsidian counterparts. But the real shock came in 2019 when archaeologists unearthed a weapons cache near the city's ceremonial center. Bronze mace heads lay stacked like firewood, their edges still sharp enough to draw blood after 5 centuries underground. These weren't ceremonial objects, they were battlefield-ready, mass-produced on a scale that suggests the Tarascans didn't just use metal, they industrialized it. How did they outpace their neighbors so dramatically? The answer lies in geography. The Purépecha homelands sat atop some of Mesoamerica's richest copper deposits, but raw materials alone don't explain their mastery. Recent studies of slag heaps, the waste left over from smelting, reveal a startling sophistication. The Tarascans didn't just melt copper, they alloyed it with arsenic or tin to create bronze, adjusting ratios for different purposes. Harder alloys formed weapons, while more malleable blends became jewelry or trade goods. Even more impressive, their supply chains. Trace element analysis shows they imported tin from as far away as modern-day Bolivia, weaving a trade network that stretched thousands of miles. Yet for all their innovation, the Tarascans left almost no written records of their techniques. Spanish chronicles mention metalworkers of great skill, but by the late 1500s the knowledge had evaporated. Some blame the Purépecha's strict guild system, where metallurgy was a closely guarded secret passed orally within families. Others point to the ecological cost. Deforestation from charcoal production may have forced abandonment of mines long before European contact. But the most haunting theory comes from Tarascan descendants themselves. Elders in Michoacán still tell of a prophecy that metal would one day bring both power and ruin. When smallpox and Spanish steel arrived simultaneously in the 1520s, the surviving Purépecha may have seen catastrophe as fate fulfilled, deliberately letting their knowledge fade rather than feed the invaders' greed. Today, fragments of this lost science surface in unexpected ways. Traditional cooks in Michoacán still use copper pots said to sing at the right temperature for carnitas, a faint echo of metallurgical precision. Meanwhile, archaeologists pore over a 16th-century manuscript called the Relación de Michoacán, its pages hinting at sacred rituals where metalworkers communed with the earth itself. The Tarascans didn't just forge tools, they forged a covenant with the elements, one so powerful its absence still whispers in the clink of a copper bell or the gleam of a half-buried bronze blade turned up by the plow. High in the bone-dry mountains of southern Peru, where rain falls so rarely that even cacti struggle to survive, the Wari Empire pulled off an agricultural miracle. They didn't just survive in this brutal landscape, they thrived, carving terraces into cliff faces and channeling distant glacial meltwater through stone-lined canals with precision that would make modern engineers pause. Their outposts like Cerro Ball weren't mere way stations, they were bold declarations of power perched on mesa tops like stone crowns surveying the desert below. But what's truly astonishing isn't that they built these feats of engineering, it's that they walked away from them at the height of their success, leaving behind irrigation systems so effective some still function today. Take Cerro Ball's brewery, for instance. Archaeologists found evidence of massive chicha production, enough to fuel epic feasts for thousands, all brewed in a desert where water was more precious than gold. The Wari didn't just transport water, they weaponized it, using alcohol as a political tool to bind alliances with neighboring cultures. Yet here's the paradox: sediment cores from nearby lake beds reveal that just as the Wari's influence peaked around the year 800, the climate began to shift. Ice layers in Andean glaciers showed decades-long droughts, and suddenly, those meticulously maintained canals ran dry. What's eerie isn't the abandonment itself, but how deliberate it seems. At Cerro Mejia, another Wari stronghold, researchers uncovered storehouses filled with untouched food, their doors carefully sealed. There were no signs of conflict, no hastily discarded tools, just a quiet exodus, as if the Wari had received some unspoken memo to evacuate. Some theories suggest they'd seen this coming for generations. Their terraces weren't just practical, they were experiments, each level planted with different crops to test drought resistance. The Wari weren't just farmers, they were early climate scientists, running centuries-long trials on soil and water retention. The real mystery lies in what they left behind. At the site of Wari Wilca, a canal splits into two channels, one for irrigation, the other feeding a stone basin too small for agriculture. Recent excavations revealed the basin's floor was lined with offerings, spondylus shells from distant Ecuador, nuggets of raw copper, and a single carved stone depicting a weeping deity. This wasn't just engineering, it was ritual, a plea to forces beyond human control. The wary didn't just harness water, they worshipped it, and when the rains failed, their faith may have unraveled faster than their empire. Now here's what lingers in these ruins, the unsettling familiarity. Like modern cities tapping shrinking aquifers, the wary pushed their environment to the brink, certain their ingenuity could outlast nature. Their terraces still cling to mountainsides, their canals still trace ghostly lines across the desert, not as monuments to failure, but as warnings. They mastered the art of survival in a land that forgives no mistakes, only to discover the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the smartest move isn't to dig deeper wells or build higher walls. It's knowing when to walk away. Off the southwest coast of Florida, where mangroves twist like gnarled fingers into the Gulf's shallow waters, the Calusa built an empire not of stone but of shells, millions upon millions of them, piled into islands so vast they could be seen from miles at sea. These weren't just refuse heaps, they were feats of engineering. The tallest rose over 30 feet high, their slopes reinforced with layers of oyster and conch shells packed tight enough to withstand hurricanes. At their peak around 1500, these shell mounds supported palaces with floors polished smooth as marble, temples draped in fishing nets woven with pearls, and canals wide enough for 80-foot dugout canoes to glide between islands like watery highways. But the Calusa's real genius wasn't their construction, it was their defense. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in 1516, expecting an easy conquest, they found something no European army had ever faced, a civilization that turned water itself into a weapon. The Calusa had transformed their mangrove archipelago into a labyrinth, digging canals that only their navigators could decipher. Some channels led to dead-end lagoons where attackers would be trapped by the tide. Others funneled invaders into narrow passages where archers perched on shell platforms could rain down arrows tipped with stingray spines. A venom so potent, historical accounts describe wounded Spaniards writhing in agony for days. Even the seemingly solid ground was a trap. Certain shell mounds were hollowed out beneath the surface, their thin crusts collapsing under the weight of armored soldiers. At Mount Key, the Calusa's capital, archaeologists have uncovered something even more astonishing. A watercourt spanning 7 acres, its walls lined with intricate shell carvings of sharks and turtles. This wasn't just a ceremonial space, it was a strategic command center. From here, the Calusa king, or cacique, could monitor ship movements across the Gulf, dispatching fleets of canoes to intercept threats before they reached shore. Spanish logs complain of phantom fleets appearing from nowhere, their warriors painted blue-green to blend with the water. The Calusa didn't just resist colonization, they dominated the invaders psychologically, staging mock naval battles at night with torches to make their forces appear endless. What's truly remarkable is how little the Calusa needed from the land. While other cultures farmed, they engineered an entire ecosystem. Their shell mounds weren't just foundations, they were filters, layering oyster shells to purify freshwater springs in a region with no rivers. They farmed the sea, creating artificial reefs by sinking logs to attract fish, and cultivated mangrove forests to nurture shellfish. When drought struck, they dug canals to redirect tidal flows, maintaining their food supply while inland tribes starved. Yet their greatest defense wasn't technology, it was knowledge. The Calusa read the Gulf's rhythms like a language, predicting storms from the flight of seabirds and enemy movements from shifts in the tide. When a hurricane destroyed a Spanish fort in 1567, the Calusa had evacuated their coastal villages days earlier. Survivors wrote of returning to find shell mounds untouched, their staircases of conch shells gleaming in the sun as if taunting the storm. The ultimate irony, the very thing that made the Calusa invincible, their mastery of water, may have doomed them. As European diseases ravaged their population, the intricate canal networks became ghost roads, their carefully balanced ecosystems crumbling without human stewardship. Today, all that remains are a few shell islands slowly eroding into the sea, their layers revealing fragments of the civilization that once defied empires. A fishhook carved from deer bone, a ceremonial mask inlaid with shark's teeth, and the stubborn refusal to be anything but lords of their liquid kingdom. Deep in the cloud forests of Peru, where the Andes slope steeply into the Amazon, a city of ghosts clings to the mountainside. This was Vilcabamba, the Inca's last defiant stand against the Spanish Empire, a jungle fortress so well concealed that when Hiram Bingham stumbled upon its ruins in 1911, he dismissed them as a minor outpost. The man who'd rediscovered Machu Picchu just weeks earlier didn't realize he was standing on the true lost city of the Incas, the final refuge where the last independent Inca rulers waged a guerrilla war for 36 years after their empire had supposedly fallen. The Spanish called it the War of the Shadows, a brutal cat and mouse conflict fought across canyons and mist-shrouded peaks. While conquistadors occupied Cusco and paraded puppet kings, the rebel Inca Tupac Amaru turned Vilcabamba into an insurgent capital. The city's location was no accident. Perched at the ecological crossroads between highlands and jungle, it offered everything a resistance needed: steep defenses, hidden agricultural terraces, and escape routes into the Amazon. Archaeologists have since found evidence of a society preparing for eternity: storehouses stocked with freeze-dried potatoes, forgers repurposing Spanish iron into weapons, even a ceremonial plaza where warriors drank chicha from the skulls of captured enemies. What makes Vilcabamba's story so gripping isn't just its defiance, it's the intimacy of its downfall. Spanish chronicles describe the final assault in 1572 with eerie detail. Soldiers hacking through vines as thick as a man's arm, Inca archers firing from trees woven with thorny barriers, and Tupac Amaru's final stand at a stone bridge now called Teotihuacan, the Golden Crossing. When captured, the last Inca was paraded through Cusco in chains before his public execution. His death meant to extinguish hope, but in the mountains, whispers persisted. Villagers near Vilcabamba still recount stories of warriors who slipped away into the forest, their descendants guarding the ruins long after the Spanish gave up searching. Modern expeditions have peeled back layers of this legend. LiDAR scans reveal Vilcabamba was far larger than Bingham imagined, a sprawling network of terraces, temples, and residential compounds camouflaged by the jungle. The most poignant discovery, a series of small, hidden rooms built into cliff faces, their walls blackened by cooking fires. These weren't royal chambers, they were safe houses, proof that even in their final days, the Inca sheltered civilians amid the fighting. Yet Vilcabamba's greatest secret might be written not in stone, but in the land itself. The city's agricultural terraces use a soil mix called waru-waru, a blend of ash, gravel, and organic matter that regenerates fertility. While other rebel strongholds starved, Vilcabamba's gardens kept bearing fruit. Today, Quechua farmers still cultivate these same plots, their crops nourished by the same dirt that fed the resistance. The Spanish may have won the war, but the land remembers. Every potato pulled from that earth, every cornstalk swaying where Inca sentries once stood, is a silent rebuttal to the idea that empires ever truly disappear. Beneath the rolling hills of eastern Oklahoma, where the Arkansas River carves its path through the prairie, a cluster of ancient mounds hides artifacts that defy imagination. This is Spiro, the once great ceremonial center of the Mississippian culture, where archaeologists unearthed a trove of engraved conch shells so intricate they seem to chart a map between worlds. These aren't mere decorations. Etched into their pearlescent surfaces are scenes of horned serpents coiled around celestial bodies, winged figures with the bodies of men and the faces of owls, and geometric patterns that mirror the night sky's brightest constellations. One shell, split open like a sacred book, reveals a tableau of dancers frozen mid-step, their limbs elongated as if moving through water or air, or perhaps something far stranger. The mystery deepens when you learn where these shells originated. The conchs themselves came from the Gulf of Mexico, hundreds of miles away, traded along routes that connected Spiro to distant cultures. But the artistry is entirely local, a visual language shared only by initiates. Some engravings show beings with split eyes, one pupil round, the other slit like a snake's, suggesting visions seen in trance states. Others depict what researchers call the black drink ceremony, where figures sip from ritual cups, their bodies transforming into hybrid creatures, the most haunting panel. A procession of skeletal figures carrying sacks of stars, marching toward a gateway shaped like an elongated diamond. To modern eyes, it resembles a sci-fi stargate, but to the Spiro people, this may have been a literal portal, a passage between realms. What's baffling is the precision of these celestial references. One shell fragment, when overlaid with star charts, aligns with the position of Orion's belt during the summer solstice 1,000 years ago. Another shows a crescent moon cradling a cluster of dots, an arrangement matching the Pleiades' position during a lunar eclipse that would have been visible from Spiro around the year 1200. Were these astronomical records ritual calendars or something more profound? The answer might lie in the mounds themselves. Spiro's leaders were buried in a sacred chamber at the heart of Craig Mound, surrounded by stacks of these engraved shells like pages in a cosmic library. When archaeologists first opened the chamber in the 1930s, they found a scene frozen in time. Copper breastplates stamped with sun symbols, piles of pearls from the Mississippi River, and a staff topped with a carved red cedar owl, its wings outstretched as if mid-flight. But the most telling detail was the arrangement of the dead. Skeletons lay in concentric circles, their bones dusted with sacred red ochre, their heads pointing toward the center where a single, empty space waited. A seat for the traveler, a placeholder for the next initiate, or a silent acknowledgement that some journeys don't require a body. Today, these artifacts whisper a truth that rattles our modern assumptions. The Spiro people didn't just observe the stars, they communed with them. Their engravings aren't static art but coded instructions, left behind by a culture that saw the cosmos not as distant lights but as a living, breathable landscape. And perhaps that's the most unsettling thought of all. If their world was this vast, what unseen dimensions might still be waiting for us to rediscover? Off the coast of northwest Africa, where volcanic cliffs plunge into the Atlantic, the Canary Islands hide one of history's most perplexing riddles, the Guanches. These mysterious people, described by early European explorers as towering, blonde, and blue-eyed, built entire cities inside caves, carving their world into the soft tufa rock with tools fashioned from obsidian and bone. But here's what makes their story so unsettling. Despite living just 60 miles from the African mainland, the Guanches showed no cultural or genetic ties to their neighbors. Their language, their customs, even their mummification techniques perfectly preserving their dead in ways eerily similar to the ancient Egyptians hint at origins far stranger than mere isolation. Could these islanders have been the last survivors of something much older? Step inside the caves of Belmoco or Cuva Pintada, and you'll find walls etched with swirling spirals and geometric patterns, symbols that mirror those found in megalithic sites across Europe, from Ireland's Newgrange to Malta's Hypogeum. The Guanches didn't just dwell in these caverns, they designed them. Chambers were divided by stone partitions, some with ventilation shafts to channel ocean breezes, others with ceilings blackened by centuries of hearth smoke. In the deepest recesses, archaeologists have uncovered stone altars stained with animal sacrifices, their surfaces grooved to funnel blood into ceremonial pits. Yet the most haunting discoveries are the graves. Guanche mummies, their skin still taut after 1,000 years, were often buried with pouches of crushed seashells. a ritual with no parallel in Africa, but uncannily reminiscent of burial practices in prehistoric Brittany. Then there's the question of their appearance. Spanish chroniclers wrote of Guanches with skin as pale as the northern peoples, their hair bleached gold by the sun. Modern DNA tests confirm traces of a unique haplogroup, U6B1, a genetic marker found nowhere else on Earth except among a handful of Basque and Berber populations. Some scholars argue they were descendants of Cro-Magnon hunter-gatherers who fled rising sea levels at the end of the Ice Age. Others whisper of Plato's lost Atlantis, suggesting the Canaries could be the mountaintops of that sunken kingdom, their caves sheltering refugees from the flood. The strongest evidence might lie in what the Guanches didn't have: boats. Despite being masterful swimmers who hunted tuna with wooden harpoons, they never built vessels capable of crossing open water. This wasn't a people who arrived by sea. They acted like survivors stranded when the sea arrived. Their legends speak of a cataclysmic wave, a great wall of water, that forced their ancestors into the highlands. Could this be folk memory of the Storegga Slide, the tsunami that devastated Europe's coastlines 8,000 years ago? One clue lingers in the island's remotest caves. At Risco Caído, a vertical shaft pierces the ceiling of a painted chamber, allowing the equinox sun to strike a carved spiral at noon. The effect is precise, deliberate, a calendar marking time in a place where time seems to have stopped. The Guanches didn't just endure on these islands, they encoded their past into the rock itself, leaving behind a question not just of who they were, but what they were trying to remember. Their caves aren't just shelters, they're archives written in stone and shadow, waiting for someone to read between the lines. From the jungle-shrouded ruins of the White City to the shell-mound fortresses of the Calusa, these 25 secrets reveal an America far older, stranger, and more sophisticated than textbooks ever imagined. Who would have guessed that beneath the Amazon's emerald canopy lay highways rivaling Rome's, or that the ancestral Pueblones encoded lunar cycles into desert stone? Every discovery shatters stereotypes like the Tarascans, who mastered bronze while Europe still clung to iron, or the Weri, whose drought-defying terraces whisper lessons for our own climate crisis. These aren't just lost cities, they're missing chapters in the story of human ingenuity. Think about what binds them together: the Olmec's decapitated colossi, the Chimu's flood prophecies etched in adobe, the Guanches' cave-bound echoes of Atlantis all speak to civilizations that thrived, adapted, and ultimately left behind puzzles carved in stone and earth. Some collapses were violent, others eerily deliberate, but each offers a mirror to our own world. When the Maya sealed their sacred tunnels or the Inca retreated to Vilcabamba's guerrilla stronghold, they weren't just vanishing. They were making choices about survival, memory, and what to carry into the unknown. Now it's your turn. Which mystery lingers in your mind? Is it Cahokia's silent mounds where a moon-worshipping culture walked away without a word? Or Spiro's cosmic conch shells mapping skies we're only beginning to decode? Hit comment and share your pick, then subscribe to join us as we keep peeling back the layers of history's greatest enigmas. The past isn't finished speaking. Are you listening?